By providing space for constant evolution, we can all transform how we view ourselves and the world around us.
Before I begin, I want to ask you all to think of something that you would really love to achieve. Perhaps it's a particular challenge or adventure, a place you want to visit, or a career opportunity that you wish to pursue. It doesn't matter how far-fetched or impossible it may seem. If you're a visual person, try to imagine what it would look like to achieve that thought. If you're not a visual person, think about how it might feel if you were to accomplish it. Right now, it's just a thought. No one can comment on it or criticize it, so let your imagination run wild. So I'm currently a board-certified health and wellness coach, founder of Achieving Awesome Nutrition and Lifestyle Coaching, a level 2 CrossFit coach, host of Before and After podcast, and a project manager. But prior to that, I was a professional sailor, and it is my career in sailing, more specifically how it came about, that I want to talk to you about today. A few career highlights from that time include sailing across the Atlantic Ocean 17 times, rescuing a man overboard in near impossible conditions in the southern Indian Ocean, and sailing somewhere close to about 250,000 nautical miles over the course of my career. You see, when I mention sailing and ocean racing, people typically assume that it's something that I grew up with, that it's in my blood. But that actually couldn't be further from the truth. My family never owned a boat. I only ever tried dinghy sailing a couple of times during summer vacations when I was a kid, and I grew up in England, about as far away from the ocean as it's possible to get over there. Up until the age of 16, I had dreamt up grand plans for my future, including, but most certainly not limited to, being the UK's first female Formula One driver, being the first woman to walk on the moon, and being the lead ballerina of the English National Ballet. But sadly, at the age of 16, I stopped being able to see a future for myself. I stopped dreaming big. A number of difficult things in my life collided at that time, and I rapidly fell into the grips of a severe eating disorder. Then, one night, a couple of weeks after Christmas in early 1997, I collapsed unconscious. To this day, there are several hours of my life that I cannot remember, but I will never forget the image that first came into view as I slowly began to regain consciousness. My dad had a book on the coffee table about an around-the-world yacht race. On the front cover was a big sailboat leaning right over with bright orange storm sails. The crew huddled together in the cockpit. A steely gray ocean towered over them. It looked bleak, cold, and terrifying. But there was something so alluring about that image. As I continued to stare at it, something happened that would ultimately shape my future and transform me into the person that stands before you today. I had a thought. What if I could do that? I immediately felt ashamed and embarrassed for even thinking that. I mean, there I was, sick, with a long recovery ahead of me and zero self-confidence. Why would I even begin to think that I could do something like that? I would need to be physically and mentally tough and strong, the exact opposite of where I was in that moment. But that thought would not go away. It occurred to me that for as long as it was just a thought, no one could take it away from me or tell me that I was crazy or that I would never be able to accomplish something like that. It was my own private thought. I had no idea what the future might look like for me. But with that thought came a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could. 2 years later, and somewhat reluctantly, I arrived at Southampton University on the central south coast of England. I had fought my way back to good health and somewhat haphazardly applied to a handful of universities on the premise that whichever one accepted me first, I would attend. A couple of weeks into my first semester, I realized that my cash flow needed a little assistance. So I got a job in a bar at the local harbor. Don't worry, the drinking age is 18 over there. On my first day at work, I noticed that the fleet of boats moored right outside that bar were none other than the boats that appeared on the front cover of that book on the coffee table. 72-foot steel ocean racing boats spending their summer fulfilling corporate sailing engagements before setting off to race around the world again. The captains and crews would come into the bar on a regular basis, and I would listen intently to their stories about sailing and racing across oceans. Eventually, I got brave enough to ask them what it took to become a captain and lead a team around the world. It was in that same bar that a group of local racing sailors asked me one day if I wanted to go out sailing with them. I didn't know these guys at all, but my gut instinct told me to say yes. The next day, my world changed. I stepped off that boat after a long day on the water, tired, sunburned, and completely clueless about how anything worked on that boat. But a fire had been lit in my soul. My thought that I'd entertained a couple of years earlier was now becoming a dream. I jumped at any and all opportunity to go sailing. Different boats, different crews, different weather. The colder, wetter, and more challenging it was, the more I thrived. I even got a job cleaning boats, just so that I could poke around and learn more. As soon as I graduated from university, I signed on to a 17-week course to get my yacht master's or captain's license. On the first day of the course, the chief instructor of the sailing school went around the group and asked us all why we were there seeking that qualification. There was 5 guys and me. I answered last and somewhat surprised myself when I quite confidently stated that I planned to race around the world as captain. Well, the room fell silent. Some eyebrows were raised, throats were cleared, and at least someone was kind enough to hide their laughter with a cough. But I was serious. In that moment, my thought that had turned into a dream transformed into a belief. As soon as I was qualified as a captain, I was determined to work on those 72-foot boats. So I sought out any opportunity I could to gain the necessary experience. Within a year, I had secured the role of first mate, or second in command, assisting with corporate sailing, and eventually completing 2 Atlantic Ocean crossings, during which I experienced my first hurricane-force winds. That proved to me that I had what it took, that I was strong enough and tough enough physically and mentally. My thought that had turned into a dream that transformed into a belief was now a goal. The critical part of making any goal a success is to create an action plan. Unfortunately, it transpired that the steel boats would not be racing around the world again. But another company offered a similar opportunity. A fleet of 10 68-foot boats with 1 professional captain and up to 17 amateur crew on board at any one time. So I made a plan. 10 years after collapsing unconscious, and almost exactly 5 years after first announcing my intention to race around the world, I crossed the start line as captain of Glasgow Clipper in the 2007 to 08 Clipper Round the World yacht race. We sailed 36,000 nautical miles in the most extremes of environment, including violent storms, the doldrums, and we were even chased by orcas. 10 months later, we returned home with a podium position, and I became the first female captain to successfully circumnavigate the globe in the Clipper race. And I want to add, thank you. I do want to add that I was the first female captain in that particular race. Not ever. A couple of other awesome females beat me to that one. So I invite you to think back to what I asked of you at the beginning of this talk. It may not happen overnight, but if you take that thought and you let it sink in, if you allow it to become a dream and you find yourself believing that that might just be possible to achieve, then try turning it into a goal. And once you've set that goal, well, all you need then is an action plan. Now go get it. Thank you.